Hey guys, my name's Hunter and this is my channel, The Mutual Revolt. Today I want to talk to you about an essay titled State Socialism and Anarchism, How Far They Agree and Wherein They Differ by Benjamin R. Tucker. Written in 1886, the essay does three things. It establishes a basic definition of socialism, points to three thinkers that Tucker sees as its founders, and compares and contrasts state socialism and anarchism as the two wings in modern socialism. Modern here being a little elastic because we are talking about an essay written in 1886. However, I'd say it's a pretty important essay in understanding the origins of left-wing market anarchism, mutualism, as well as individualist anarchism. A link to the full text can be found in the description below, as well as an audio reading by my friend Ed Riffles. Now, before proceeding, I just want to be clear that this is not a conclusive nor universally agreed upon text. Both before and after Tucker, there's been a lot of dispute about the definitions and understanding of ideas in the text itself. That said, I think it's a pretty important starting place for newcomers to anarchism, as well as will help set the tone for this channel itself. That said, let's get cracking. Probably no agitation has ever attained the magnitude, either in the number of its recruits or the area of its influence, which has been attained by modern socialism, and at the same time been so little understood and so misunderstood, not only by the hostile and the indifferent, but by the friendly, and even by the great mass of its adherents themselves. In this opening passage, Tucker is pointing out the disputed understanding and definition of socialism. In the 1880s, socialism was seen a little different than it is in our day, where it's largely associated with the Soviet Union and Communist bloc, or, this guy. For Tucker, though, socialism finds its origins in the work of the 18th century economist Adam Smith, like his book, The Wealth of Nations. Specifically, it's Smith's understanding that labor is a true measure of value that socialists would pick up and take to its logical conclusion. According to Tucker, three men in particular would take up Smith's discovery and establish a new economic philosophy. Josiah Warren of the United States, Pierre-Joseph Proudhon of France, and Karl Marx of Germany. These men all at least tacitly agreed and upheld what is commonly known as the labor theory of value. Basically, the idea is that prices fall to the cost of production, the central component of production being the labor involved. Just a heads up, the labor theory of value is pretty disputed amongst economists, socialists, and anarcho-capitalists, so for the sake of brevity, I'm going to avoid that rabbit's hole today. If you're interested in that debate, comment down below and I'll work it into the schedule. Oh, crap. I just said, not today, Satan.
You have no power here, mutualist.
That's what you think. The power of Carson compels you. Go back from whence you came, and take your damn roads with you.
I'll get you next time, in your little labor theory of value too.
Back to what I was saying. Now, according to Tucker, all three men deduct from Smith's work that the proper wage of labor is its product, that all income is derived from labor, and that all forms of income that abstract value other than through labor do so through the trinity of usury, rent, interest, and profit, none of which could be derived except through the power of monopoly and state privilege. Now, this might be a little bit of a simplification of the three men's ideas, as even Tucker would admit. However, it does get to the heart of the socialistic ideas of all three men despite their linguistic and terminological differences. For all three, it's the issue of monopoly and the control of capital that is the chief concern. It's what they believe can and should be done that divides them. For Tucker, there are two approaches. One path that's based on the principle of authority, the other on the principle of liberty. Marx took the former, Proudhon and Warren took the latter. Marx's strategy entails accepting monopoly as a tendency within society, and thus prescribes a centralization and consolidation of class monopolies within the worker state. For Tucker, this can be described as the doctrine that all the affairs of men should be managed by the state, regardless of individual choice, and that society must seize the capital that belongs to it, by the ballot if it can, through revolution if it must. Once in possession of it, administer it on the majority principle, through its organ, the state. Organize it in production and distribution, fix all prices according to the amount of labor involved, and employ the whole people in its stores, workshops, and farms, etc. The nation must be transformed into a vast bureaucracy, and every individual into a state official. Everyone in the country is a wage receiver, and the state the only wage payer. In short, Marx's solution for monopolies is one unified and total monopoly. The result, Tucker predicts, is a state religion, a totalitarian state that controls hygiene, what you can and can't eat, drink, wear, or smoke. A moral code that criminalizes everything that the majority deems a vice. A state nursery and education system that controls how one is raised and everything that one is allowed to learn. Finally, a state family that practices scientific breeding, controlling who can and can't have children, and how many. Now, some Marxists may find this as a far-right caricature, arguing that Marx was less interested in future societies and more interested in the tendencies of capitalism during his time. However, many Marxists would agree that an admirer of Marx, Vladimir Lenin, outlined and implemented a practical, if imperfect, form of socialism. On this subject, Lenin is very honest, especially in his pamphlet State and Revolution, which is ironically considered one of his more libertarian pieces. In chapter 5, section 4, he states that in the first stage of communism, all citizens are here transformed into hired employees of the state, which is made of armed workers. All citizens become employees and workers of one national state syndicate. All that is required is that they should work equally, regularly do their share of work, and should all receive equal pay. All managed by a system of accounting and control that the monopolies and capitalism Lenin believes have perfected. The failure of the Soviet experiment in many ways was predicted by Tucker nearly 30 years before the 1917 revolution. Quite frankly, except for libertarian forms of Marxism like autonomists or situationists, which most of y'all don't know anything about, this seems to be the only strategy that Marxists have for moving beyond capitalism. In Tucker's view, this is the path of authority, and the end result of state socialism. Trying to liberate people through this power of the state is difficult, if not impossible, due to the dynamics of power. In the words of Anthony Gregg, the state is about privilege. It is about power. It is about class stratification, the redistribution of wealth from the many to the few, war, torture, tribalism writ large, prisons, police, borders, and control. Those who control the state are the ruling class, whether they claim to serve God, the nation, or the working class. Contrary to Marx, Warren and Proudhon pursued the path of liberty. Tucker describes this approach, anarchism, as the doctrine that all the affairs of men should be managed by individuals or voluntary associations, and that the state should be abolished. As opposed to Marx, Warren and Proudhon aimed to get rid of the authority that they saw as allowing monopoly. By allowing full liberty and full competition, the antithesis of monopoly to be universalized, the two believed that the trinity of usury could be dissolved. In Warren and Proudhon's eyes, competition in labor was accepted, but when it came to capital, the capitalist interests were defended by state privilege and protection, which enabled monopoly prices. Because of this one-sided competition, rent, interest, and profit came from the exploitation of the working classes, due to the capitalists, lenders, and landlords' disproportionate legal privilege. As Tucker puts it, laissez-faire was very good sauce for the goose, labor, but very poor sauce for the gander, capital. You've gotta love the 19th century idioms, right? Like, I love them. The solution to this one-sided competition appeared clear to Warren and Proudhon. Capital needed to be subjected to the natural law of competition. By doing so, the price of lending and banking would fall, interests just representing then the cost of the institutions handling and transferring the loans. Because of this, they supported absolute free trade at home and abroad as a universal rule. At the same time, they opposed monopoly in both the state socialist form as well as the various class monopolies of their day. Of the latter, there existed four distinct forms: the money, the land, the tariff, and the patent monopolies. Okay guys, now I'm not gonna lie, my eyes are even starting to glaze over, so let's take a quick coffee break. Okay? Hey man.
Hey dude, what you doing?
Just shooting a video about anarchism and state socialism.
Oh yeah, you're really doing that?
Yeah, why do you ask?
I don't know, man. Do you ever think your fascination with anarchism stems from a refusal to accept authority and other aspects of life? Like becoming an adult.
You want to say that again?
That's the stuff.
You know, I think the problem with a lot of the economic stuff is how abstract it gets. You know, I could throw up a supply and demand curve, show how price ceilings or price floors result in a deadweight loss when implemented. But you know, I think we need to talk about something a little bit more material. Like the sugar. Now, unless you've been in an econ class where tariffs were discussed, you're probably unaware that you pay too much for sugar. On the world market, the price per pound is about 7 to 10 cents cheaper, which means that you pay $10 to $15 extra per year. The reason for this is because the tariff system created to protect the national sugar industry of the US from dumping, which really just means that foreign sugar can be imported cheaper than we can make the stuff here. Billions of dollars have been spent protecting the national industry, usually arguing that free trade would destroy jobs. Now, this may be true in some circumstances, but it doesn't include the jobs in industry that are lost by promoting this monopoly. Many companies and businesses have moved overseas, setting up foreign factories and foreign plants so that they can import the final product, usually made with sugar from Mexico or Brazil, in cheaper than if they had pre-created it here. It also leaves out all the businesses here, like bakeries, chocolatiers, candy makers, and other mom and pop shops that have to compete against international companies that have the capital to offset the tariff. Now, the US is hardly alone in imposing tariffs on sugar, so that gives us grounds to speculate that even the world market rate is artificially high. When we consider that we're just talking about sugar, and that similar tariffs are imposed on other farm commodities and products, it's not hard to believe that Americans alone are paying thousands of dollars extra just for the basic essentials and amenities each year. Now remember, tariffs are just one of the 4 monopolies that Warren Proudhon distinguished, the other being money, land, and patents. Now, each of these ones could be a video in and of themselves, so I'm just going to try and summarize them best I can, because this one's already running a little long. The money monopoly refers to the state regulations of who can and can't create currency. The issue here, Tucker explains, is one in which the government gets to choose who can and can't create a medium of exchange, as well as who can and can't start banking. Not to mention the state laws that criminalize anyone who decides to try and create a currency of their own. Until Bitcoin. But we'll talk about that some other time. Because the holders of this monopoly have power over the interest rate, they also impact the cost of rent and the general price of goods. Through the scarcity of banking access due to this monopoly, interest rates are kept artificially high and thus raise the general cost of living across the board. For Tucker, free competition in banking, lending, and mediums of exchange would bring interest rates down to the cost of labor, or simply the cost of handling and transferring on top of the principal of the loan. It's important to highlight here that the effect this would have on the rest of the economy was considered integral to taking on the other monopolies. Of all the monopolies, the one of money was wrestled with most as a means of social reform by Warren Proudhon. The next and perhaps more controversial is the land monopoly, where the government enforces property titles even though they aren't validated by personal occupancy or cultivation of the property. The issue here being the logic of a system of government and private property, in which a person could find themselves in a situation of always trespassing on one or the other. How can you have a right to life and liberty, but not a stretch of earth to rest, without falling under another property owner's power or having to pay rent? Even John Locke's theory of property left room here in the form of the commons, or the right of an individual to homestead a dwelling, as long as they left enough and as good in common for others. Without the commons, occupancy and cultivation as perimeters for land ownership make sense so as to ensure the state doesn't allow a few individuals to deprive the rest of the population from the planet in which they were born. Rent in this approach becomes payment to own in the future, and workplaces eventually are cooperatized, at least in theory. There's a lot more to discuss here, so be watching for a video on this issue in the future. The last one mentioned is a patent monopoly, in which everything from our media, books, computers, and medicine are given special rights in order to charge higher prices. Now, this is where some people may be sympathetic due to the idea that copyrights and patents protect small innovators and creators. However, we shouldn't forget that it's the large corporations and conglomerates who have the biggest stake in this protectionism. All one needs to do is look at the amount of lobbying from a certain cartoon company trying to keep a certain cartoon mouse from falling into public domain to realize who this benefits the most. All the while, important life-saving innovations, pharmaceuticals, and even biological organisms are kept artificially costly. Sorry people, but there's a damn line. If we don't start at patenting biological organisms, where the hell do we start drawing it? Now there's a lot more that could be said about these subjects, so if I make any more content in the future that touches on these, you'll be able to find it in the link in the description. This summary, though, gives the basic outline of the anarchist position that Tucker provides. As Tucker puts it, the anarchists are just unterrified Jeffersonian Democrats. Anarchists are those who believe that the best government is that which governs least, and that which governs least is no government at all. Believing this to such an extent that they would propose that we have voluntary and independent defense forces instead of the bureaucratic and tax-funded military and police that we have today. Contrary to the state socialists, anarchists oppose regulation or control in religion, education, health and hygiene, or family planning, believing instead that individual choices and voluntary association are the best means of allowing society to prosper. Before Tucker finishes his essay, he distinguishes his position from that of communists, who he says claim anarchism. Tucker's problem with the communists being that he believes that their goal of expropriation of private property will lead but to another state. Tucker then concludes his essay with a summary exposition by the Frenchman Ernest Lenin that you should either read or listen to Ed read. As I said before, there's been over 100 years that have passed since this was written, and things have definitely changed. Even Tucker towards the end of his life saw the situation as rather bleak, and questioned whether overthrowing the monopolies would even be enough to solve the social problems that had developed. My question for you is, how much do you believe this analysis still holds up? What's changed that has maybe made this philosophy more or less tenable? If we take anarchism as our philosophy, what of this essay do we need to take in moving forward? And what must we leave behind? If you're interested in modern views of anarchism in this line, I suggest looking into Kevin Carson and particularly his book Studies in the Mutualist Political Economy, as well as others such as Paul D'Amato who claim Tucker has a major influence in their libertarian thought. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in this kind of content, consider subscribing. Remember, liberty is not the daughter, but the mother of order. Have a great week, comrades. Until next time.